Bon après-midi. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Maria's Musings on Jess FM and Rayco. I will begin with this land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Métis people of Region 3, and the Inuit in Alberta, and express gratitude and respect for the land and water we use and commit to respecting it and the people. As you probably know, federal elections in the offing on April the 28th. I think it's pretty important that people are informed when they go to cast their ballot. So with that in mind, I want to talk to each of the candidates who would like to talk to me and would talk to you a little bit about their campaign, about what they want to do, and I have some specific questions. I'm here wearing two hats today. One, I'm a citizen of Lethbridge and a voter, and I've voted in every election except one since I was old enough to vote. And the second hat is from the National Association of Federal Retirees. And we have specific priorities, and I did share those priorities with Chris before he came today. So the questions they're questions that are certainly based on the priorities that we have as an association, but they do refer to seniors throughout our constituency, and also to everybody in the community, because you know what? Nobody gets younger, they get older. I'd like to begin by introducing the first candidate, and he's the first candidate who responded to my invitation, and he is the former mayor of Lethbridge and a staunch advocate to protect our water. And that person is Chris Spearman. Welcome, Chris. I'm really glad that you came today, and I hope that we're going to have an interesting conversation. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. So the first question, one of the very important priorities of NAFR, which is the National Association of Federal Retirees, is to protect retirement income security. This, in fact, is not just an issue for us as members of that association, but for certainly every working person right across the whole country, and lots of people right here in Lethbridge. So over the last number of years, the current Alberta government has actually talked about a different pension plan, and they want to take the money from the Canada Pension Plan for people who live in Alberta and put it in an Alberta pension plan. My members are screaming not to do that because they don't want their CPP touched. They're on fixed incomes and can't afford for any changes to happen. So in terms of retirement income, what would you, or what do you think your party would be able to do to protect our CPP where it is as part of the Canada Pension Plan?
Thank you, Maria. I'm really happy to be here today and happy to talk to the constituents of the Lethbridge, what do we call it? It's a Lethbridge constituency, but certainly I want to talk to everybody today, and I understand the importance of retirement income. I'm a retiree myself, but certainly we all look at retirement income, and especially the CPP, as almost a promise. We pay into it throughout our working careers, and to me, it was shocking when the Alberta government said that they could take that away. But something that I understood was I had paid into, my employers had matched my contributions, and the government thought that they could take it away from me. I find it unbelievable that could happen. But I understand the importance of having secure income when you're in retirement. You have a working career of probably over 40 years. You work towards that, you put money away. Your personal savings are supplemented by the government plans, and you're counting on that income. And you want it to be securely invested, and you want to make sure that you can estimate what your income is going to be in retirement. When the government suddenly makes a change, when they and do that without, as far as I can tell, a mandate. I don't remember the Alberta government campaigning in 2019 or in 2023 saying we're going to change the pension plan. In fact, they said the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They said that your pensions will be secure. Only after they got elected did they change that. So now we're talking a little bit more about provincial politics than federal politics, but I understand, it's a federal plan.
That's right.
The issue is that the provincial governments all signed on to this and agreed to it in the late 1990s. There was a crisis with the Canada Pension Plan. They thought that it wouldn't be funded, it wouldn't be sufficient, wouldn't be viable. And changes were made that were agreed to by all the provincial governments. And people have been working and on the assumption that they will be getting a Canada Pension Plan.
Yes.
So I think it's a betrayal of trust. I think the government, yes, legally they have the right to make that change, unfortunately, but they didn't consult Albertans. So ethically, they don't have that. I would say if you want to have referendums on things like whether we stay in Canada or not as a province, why wouldn't you have a referendum on whether or not they can take your pension away from you? Albertans and Canadians everywhere should be able to maintain control over the pension plan they paid into. And I think that's only fair. Any government that chooses to play bait and switch with your pension really is not on stable grounds, and I think that needs to be held up. In fact, I would insist on new legislation that we need to have something going back. We need to have the premiers come back, meet with the federal government, because I can tell you all the other premiers in this country are opposed to what Alberta tried to do. Exactly. They too are members of the Canada Pension Plan, and we need to strengthen it and make it more difficult for a provincial government to violate the rights of its pensioners.
Yes, and certainly, I've been talking about this issue for a long time, and you've heard me talk about it. And it is a provincial issue in terms of they want to take it out. However, as we have spoken to MPs across the country and asked them to stand up in Parliament and say, our constituents are saying, no, don't do this. And what can the federal government do? And as you said, it may require a piece of legislation to stop that. But certainly Alberta's already passed 2 pieces of legislation, one of which that says, yes, we'll do a referendum. However, we'll decide what we're going to do no matter what the referendum says. And that's pretty slap in your face. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, because that is a huge issue for certainly all of our members, but everybody who's paid into that Canada Pension Plan.
Well, there's a couple of more things that need to be said. One, the justification for removing Alberta from the plan is highly suspect. The report that was issued and has been circulated actually has no known authors. The company name is known, but no professional attached their personal name and their personal reputation to that report. It's highly suspect. The report really has very little credibility. The second thing is the government did do some limited consultation with Albertans. They paid for that consultation process, and this government refuses to release the results of that consultation. So they've used taxpayers' money to consult with Albertans and refused to disclose what the results were. I think that means it's highly suspect. As you say, the legislation they subsequently passed says they're required to hold a referendum, but regardless of the referendum at the time, the government can then choose to do whatever they want. And I think that really is weak, poor, and unethical legislation.
I completely agree with you. Okay, let's move on to the next big issue, healthcare. And healthcare for our citizens is incredibly important, and certainly there's a responsibility on behalf of the federal government to provide the funding for healthcare. It is up to the province to deliver that healthcare. So I always thought that the federal government could have a big hand in that. If you're not spending the money on healthcare, that they could do something. But in fact, that really isn't the case. However, when you go to Ottawa as an MP representing Lethbridge, is there anything you think you could do in terms of convincing the government caucus to maybe make some changes to make sure healthcare money is used for healthcare, not paying off tons and tons of board members who get fired in 3 months' time?
I think there does need to be some follow-up. The federal government tries to provide government-funded healthcare. That's government-funded healthcare is one of the things that Canada is known for. If you go to have a baby, if you're a young family, when you have a baby, it's not going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
That's right.
If you are unfortunate and you incur a sudden medical illness, and I incurred one of those a little more about 1.5 years ago, I'm not going to come out of the hospital broke, owing hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 6-week stay in hospital, which was my case. So I think we need to make sure that we maintain a healthcare system that protects Canadians and maintains a reasonable level of quality and a reasonable level of access. When you go to the United States, you see billboards all over the place about from lawyers where you can sue your health insurer or you can sue somebody for something that happened in an accident. We don't have that situation in Canada. We don't have a legal-based health system. And God forbid that we ever do have a legal-based health system. We need to be able to have confidence that we can go to the hospital when we need health care attention, and we need to have confidence that we can get it. The big problem is when money is delivered to provinces, if it is not administered correctly and fairly, we get situations like we're seeing now in Alberta, where money goes into private hands, things cost twice as much as they otherwise would, and services are curtailed. Doctors are in short supply in traditional medical facilities, and people have difficulty accessing the care they need. We have perpetual problems that are never resolved. Here in the city of Lethbridge, we have a limited number of gynecologists, and I understand that in order to address that, gynecologists are paid $5,000 a day to come to our city and provide locum services.
Yeah.
We're never going to solve the problem of attracting permanent gynecologists while we bring people in and pay them exorbitant amounts to provide temporary services. These are not solutions. We need to make sure that there are audits. And I think that we need to make sure that the money is going into the services that were intended and not into private hands, not into the friends of the government, and not disappearing in unethical ways. We have a massive scandal happening here in the province of Alberta in the way that federal funds have been spent when they were transferred to the province. We need to get to the bottom of that, and then we need to learn from that. Alberta needs to pass legislation, and they wanted to make sure that they could get access to medical funds or health funds without strings attached. Well, how's that turning out for us without strings attached? Basically, some people are winning and many people are losing. I know there are very frustrated people in this province who were traditional conservative supporters, people who owned medical supply businesses, who were shut out of the contracting process. When the government only gives contracts on a sole source basis to their friends, how does that support the broader business community and people who own businesses that supply healthcare equipment and healthcare services? That really makes no sense at all, and we need to get to the bottom of it to make sure that those things are competitively acquired at the lowest reasonable cost.
Good answer. Thank you. Okay, so this question is really both health and economics related. And in fact, what you had just said about healthcare and privatization, that is also healthcare and economics. But this one is, and I know it's a particularly important issue to you, we need good drinking water. If you're going to be healthy, you need good drinking water. So I guess my question to you is, when you're elected, what are you going to do about protecting our water from being contaminated by mining in the eastern slopes?
Good. Well, some people are going to say that you just lobbed an easy question at me. I've been working on that for almost a year. I attended a selenium information session in Blairmore hosted by the environmental company that had been hired by Northback. And they couldn't answer my questions. The questions that I asked were the ones City Council asked Atrium Coal 4 years ago. And I was surprised that they weren't aware of a lot of things about this area. One, when somebody said, what about the drinking water and the Oldman River, they said, no municipalities use the Oldman River as a source for drinking water. So, and then somebody else asked, how are you going to manage coal dust in our Chinook winds? And they said, well, what's the problem with that? And they said, well, we probably have the strongest winds in the country in this area. We already know that Window Mountain Lake has been contaminated with coal dust that came from the Elk Valley. And do you have a plan? And they said, well, we've done some sampling, but really there's no evidence in it. I really had no confidence that they had done effective investigation before they had developed these plans for the mines. So we know that the joint federal provincial panel rejected the Grassy Mountain project basically 4 years ago. They said that the risks far exceeded the benefits. They said that the claims made by the coal company were just not credible. And that's been my experience in asking questions. Our engineering people at the City of Lethbridge said, if excess selenium gets into the Oldman River, there is no known technology to remove it. I have challenged Northback and their environmentalists to tell me anywhere in the world where we've had excess selenium in the water, where they have successfully removed it. So people say, there's been some laboratories where they've removed selenium from the water. Removing selenium from the water in an isolated laboratory is very different than removing selenium from river water at high volumes.
Yes.
That is not a laboratory situation. We're talking about safe water for more than 100,000 people and the communities around here. We're talking about the water, safe water for farming, safe water for ranching, safe water for intensive agriculture, safe water for food processing, and safe water for drinking and cooking for all the people that live in the Oldman River Reservoir, and safe water for irrigation as well. Water is essential, and guess what? There is no secondary supply. That's different from in BC, in the Elk River Valley. They have mountain lakes that are upwind from the mines that they can draw on when their water is contaminated. We don't have a secondary supply. So protecting our drinking water is important. Getting to the federal aspect of this, both federal parties, the large federal parties, Liberal and Conservative, have talked about using our resources. The Liberals, party that I'm running for, are talking about Indigenous consultation, and they're also talking about respecting environmental concerns in their process. The Conservatives are not doing that. The Conservatives will let the Alberta government go ahead and they will let them move forward with Grassy Mountain and the government's own reports. The government of Alberta has 4 scientific reports. They all say whenever there has been a coal project, there has been excessive contamination from wind-blown coal dust or selenium leaks into the river systems. It's going to happen to the Oldman River too. The government's own reports say so. And we cannot just allow them to go unfettered, uncontrolled, and just approve this. So if I'm elected, I will be going to the Minister of Environment to make sure that they're on top of it all the time. And the federal government has responsibility not only for fisheries, but also for water. And if I'm elected and there still are no solutions, and I'm pretty confident there never will be solutions from coal companies contaminating the water, that mine will not go forward.
So one point that you didn't talk about, and I know that if as soon as I say it, you're going to recognize it, and that is bioaccumulation.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't really understand what bioaccumulation is, but in terms of selenium, do you want to follow on from that? Yeah.
So there is a private researcher, and many people know him who work in the agriculture industry, Lee Eddy. So he supplies feed to farmers, and he also writes research reports. And he talks about bioaccumulation and how that might affect the integrated agricultural economy along the Oldman River. So when you elevate the level of selenium in the water from a mine, and then you have selenium that's been added to the soils, and selenium that's been added to the animal feeds, that all runs off eventually into the water. And that's how bioaccumulation happens. Selenium is such that, and I'm not a scientist, but I've read the reports, and I get people to help me understand those reports, but selenium is additive. So when they say bioaccumulation, it means all those sources of selenium, as the water moves down the river, just attract more selenium like a magnet. And then the selenium concentrations intensify, and it's more and more difficult and more harmful to have selenium in the water. So that is the issue of bioaccumulation.
Mm-hmm. So several times, and I know you've attended a number of the sessions that I attended, people said, well, you need a certain amount of selenium in your body. And my first thought was, I remember lead paint.
Mm-hmm.
There's no lead paint anymore because there is no tolerable level of lead. There is also no tolerable level of asbestos. And anybody who's got a house here in Lethbridge that was built before 1990, I got news for you. Your gyprock all has asbestos in it, and it's expensive to remove. So if that happened with asbestos and lead, I would not be surprised, and in fact I would be surprised if it didn't reach a point where they said, no, there's no real tolerable level. What you have in your body that's it, and you'll keep that in your body. But I certainly worry about that. I worry about it for me and my neighbors and everybody in my community, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. Certainly that is something that needs to be, our water needs to be protected, and I would certainly make sure that you stay on that when you go to Ottawa.
But what's really important is to understand that acceptable levels of selenium are very, very small.
Yep.
And so the first species that I understand are affected are the fish. And people say, well, it's just fish. But if you're a fisherman and you remember how much the great varieties of fish that were available, it's a tragedy that some of those species of fish have virtually been eliminated in many places. It's not inconsequential that has happened.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, when it comes to humans, and we know that Teck has been fined in BC for levels of selenium leakage, seepage that were harmful to human health, they were still very small levels.
Yeah.
Teck tried and spent over $1 billion trying to solve the problem. I can tell you, these 5 coal companies operating in Alberta are not spending anywhere near close to that to try and prevent selenium seepage and leakage and wind-blown coal dust. If you're not concerned about it now, you should be. You should be reading the science reports. You should be challenging your politicians. Why are they doing this? The economic case does not make sense. We have had an integrated agriculture economy here for more than 7 decades, and it's been growing all the time, providing wealth to people who live in this area. Why would we jeopardize that for 400 jobs at a coal mine? It makes no sense. Somebody's got to, people have to stop sitting on their hands. People have to hold their politicians accountable. This Alberta government moved forward without a mandate on coal. Yeah. Not once, twice. The Jason Kenney government of 2019 moved forward. Albertans rebelled and said, no way. They were worried about harm to the mountains, to the pristine mountains, and to the natural spaces and to the fishing areas. And we have a more intense issue today when we actually have these mining companies exploring and drilling with the go-ahead of the government. So this government in 2023 got elected, never had a mandate again, never mentioned it during the election, and after the 2021 joint panel decision when the project was rejected, and the company Northback sued 3 times in the courts and lost all 3 times on appeal, the company and the other coal companies went behind our backs to the government and lobbied them to get changes to allow them to proceed. In what legal case, when you go to court and lose and appeal 3 times, can you go to the government and have them change the result? But that's exactly what happened. And now the government's saying there could be consequences for Alberta taxpayers if they don't honor the agreements they've made with the coal companies. Well, let's go to court. Mm-hmm. There are clauses in the Minerals Act that should protect taxpayers. The biggest crisis would be if this Alberta government goes forward and settles with the coal companies with your tax dollars without your permission. Mm-hmm. So that's something all Albertans should keep an eye on. But Albertans should be telling their politicians, you don't have a mandate to make any agreements with coal companies. Shut it down now.
Thank you. All right, this question is kind of specific about seniors right now, but it's going to affect all of us because eventually we'll all be seniors. And that is a senior strategy. A strategy that's national in scope, that protects our seniors, makes sure that they can live their life in dignity and safety right through to the end of life. And that would certainly include things like having home care and long-term care that's adequate, well, beyond adequate. Our seniors have provided us with everything we have. We need to provide them for what they need to end of life.
I think what we want is predictability, and we want dignity for seniors. People who have worked all their lives, sometimes they get to the point where they can't make decisions for themselves. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they lose their cognitive abilities. At the same time, they deserve respect. And if you've been a contributing member of our society through your work and contributions, and you're having to be placed into care, or if your relatives are having to look after you, you should be able to do that with confidence that the government's not going to claw back your benefits or eliminate them. Yeah. Everything you've worked for should be progressive. It disturbs me that when one level of government provides a benefit that improves the lives of seniors, so let's be honest about it. Seniors' incomes they're not frozen. They are indexed to some level, but generally, as you get older, you fall behind the cost of living. You have difficulty affording services.
Mm-hmm.
Things like dental services. When the federal government provides a dental assistance program, or provides, I think recently last week, $200 in a month in benefits. Why would other governments remove that benefit and remove it from seniors? It's unbelievable. When you see parties consistently voting against enhanced benefits for seniors, while at the same time increasing their own personal benefits, lining their own pockets. If you're a federal MP with a gold-plated pension plan, how can you vote against pension enhancements and health benefits for people who don't have what you've got? When you see people consistently voting against seniors' benefits, and then when it comes to the election, they offer a few token improvements to seniors, are you going to trust them? Because if they form the government, they're going to go back to those things they voted against before and begin removing services. It makes no sense to me that we begin undermining the services that seniors have worked for. It's basically a violation of trust in my mind. I will always support maintaining and enhancing benefits for those who have earned them throughout their lives and their careers.
Thank you. There's an old saying that best predictor of the future is past behavior.
Yep.
And I hope that people remember that when they go to the polls. Okay, so the last question I have is going to be a free-for-all for you. What would you like to say to the citizens of Lethbridge to encourage them to vote for you?
Well, I think I want to appeal to all citizens in Lethbridge. Mm-hmm. I want you to know that if I was elected, I would do things differently. We've watched our elected representatives basically increase partisanship, increase division. They spend their entire term attacking the current government. Rather than moving and improving services for citizens. There's a number of possible outcomes. Right now, it looks like the Liberals are going to win the election, and Mark Carney is going to be our Prime Minister. In that scenario, what good does it do to elect a member of the opposition who's going to spend the next 4 years basically railing against the government and doing nothing for local citizens? In my scenario, if I'm elected and Mark Carney's elected, I can have tremendous influence for Lethbridge. And I can be a strong voice for Lethbridge, as I was when I was a mayor. When I was a mayor, I was able to attract more than $1 billion of new investment into the city of Lethbridge, starting with things like the Cavendish potato plant. Mm-hmm. Our existing industries expanded and were growing. Multi-million-dollar projects that expanded at Richardson Oilseeds, at Pepsi Frito-Lay, at other industries in our industrial park. We worked with the provincial government. We got funding for the science building at the university, $250 million. We moved forward and completed the leisure center, $240 million. We improved the Lethbridge Airport, $26 million. And 90% of that came from other orders of government, mainly the federal government. We got the Nikiyuko Bunka Center approved. That was about a $5 million project, all federal funding. We got the Liate Center renovated, all, again, federal funding. We built a downtown bus terminal.
Yes.
Federal and provincial funding. So all those things went forward. I think I demonstrated fiscal responsibility. In 2019, we had the lowest tax increase in 20 years, about 1.92%, followed by 3 consecutive years of 0% tax increases. So we managed to do things in Lethbridge. We accessed our fair share of provincial and federal grant systems in order to provide benefits for the citizens of Lethbridge. I would continue to do those types of things with a Mark Carney federal government.
Yeah.
I would make sure that Lethbridge got its fair share. There's many people say, hey, there's only one taxpayer. Everybody's going to pay. I can tell you something. If we don't get our fair share, you're still going to pay, and other people and other communities are going to get the benefits instead of Lethbridge. In the scenario, based on the current polls, in the unlikely scenario that Canadians choose Pierre Poilievre as the best person to confront Donald Trump, I would still be collaborative. I remember when I was a young person 50 years ago, when the federal government was made up of parties which shared power. Mm-hmm. And Pierre Trudeau had to deal with Robert Stanfield and had to deal with David Lewis in order to maintain a government in the early 1970s.
Yeah.
Those leaders and politicians and those parties had different perspectives, but somehow they managed to work together. There wasn't that same element of division. They all recognized that collaboration was important. And we need to make sure that we continue to do that. If I'm successful in Lethbridge and Pierre Poilievre is successful, I would reach across the aisle. I would make sure I could do the best I could. I'm not going to waste 4 years banging on a drum saying what a terrible government they are. I'm going to do the best I possibly can for the citizens of Lethbridge. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a point we need to make sure, and I would just ask Lethbridge citizens to reflect. I am realistic about this approach. I wanted to try something different. The Lethbridge riding has never, ever elected a Liberal. Mm-hmm. But I can say that I'm willing to try. I see there's a great opportunity, and I am trying to do something that has never been done before. And I hope that I can reach out to the progressive conservatives. I hope that I can reach out to the people who normally vote for the NDP and normally vote for the Green and say, you can trust me. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to consult with everyone if I'm successful. I'm going to make sure, and I have always done that. I've always held meetings. I've always had input. I always respected the press. I value good journalism. I never refuse to answer questions. I never limit questions. I always make myself available, and I answer the questions as best as I possibly can. It's important to be open and honest when you're in public service. It's not good to be hiding. It's not good to refuse to answer questions. It's not good to focus only on a narrow portion of your base. That's not real democracy. That's not what I believe in. That's not what I'm going to do if I'm elected. I'm going to represent everybody to the best of my ability. And that's what I hope people will understand going forward into this election. I want to make sure Lethbridge is the best that it can possibly be, that I get the views from everyone, that I get solutions from everyone, because we need to make sure that we're all working together as a community. I want to advocate for our agri-food industry. Lethbridge has traditionally been ignored. We all know that. We need a strong voice for Lethbridge. We need somebody standing up for our agri-food businesses. We need to have people making sure that what's important to Lethbridge is on the radar. We're not completely forgotten over and over again, as has been done so frequently in the past. I believe I have the abilities and the energy to represent Lethbridge well, and I hope that you will support me on April the 28th. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate that you came, and certainly came on such short notice. The election kind of got announced, and in our office we were kind of, okay, we got to get our election plan together. How are we going to get candidates out and talk to them? And I talked to Jesse, and he said, yes, we can come and do a podcast. So I really appreciate that you came. I appreciate that you answered questions that were certainly geared towards seniors and to the members of the group that I represent, but I also represent, I am a citizen, and I am a voting citizen. And I appreciate that you came and you brought your perspective to our audience today. So thank you very much for coming. And I do want to congratulate you on receiving the King's, let me see, King's medal.
King Charles Coronation Medal. Yeah.
Yes. That's an incredible honor, and you received that for your outstanding contribution throughout your lifetime to public service. So I was so tickled when I heard about it, because it was certainly well deserved. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I was very happy to be nominated by Conservative Senator Scott Tanis, and I received my King Charles Coronation Medal together with former Conservative Senator Doug Black, who's a friend who used to come and visit me, and also other progressive conservatives were given the King Charles. I was the only Liberal who was given it at this ceremony. I was invited to come to Ottawa and receive it in the Senate chamber. And I think another interesting gentleman who received at the same time I was Ken Hughes. Ken is a rancher. His family were ranchers. He also is a former member of Parliament who served with Brian Mulroney. He also served in the provincial government as the health minister. So, you know, I have friends who are progressive conservatives, and we respect each other. You know, they're not the type of conservatives that are now in the CPC and the UPC, who basically are just alienating Canadians and promoting division and advocating for only their vision and nobody else's vision. I think Canadians have always grew up, you know, the best form of vision is one that we develop together, collectively, that we don't exclude people. I believe we need to improve our electoral system. I think we need to make sure that all voices are heard. We need, you know, this first past the post system is not helping us.
No.
It basically lends itself to creating further division down the road. We need to make sure the Greens do have a bigger voice, and we need to make sure that we have more representation based on the voting that actually happens. We have a system that basically excludes everybody who voted for candidates who came from second to fifth in every riding in this province. So I support looking at a better way for Canadians to be heard moving forward. I want to reach out to young people. That's going to sound strange to many people, but I remember, you know, I was excited about politics when I was 20 years old. I want 20-year-olds to be excited about politics today. I don't want people to be skeptical about politics. I think we've lost 2 generations of people who are now not caring. They're indifferent, and we can't afford to do that. We need to make people feel that politics is not just a bad thing you have to put up with. Politics can be a good thing. When politics is done right, governments are doing and serving the citizens together. Parties are serving citizens together. We can all have different philosophical perspectives about what those priorities should be, but we need to make sure overall we're making improvements, not tearing the system down and not tearing each other down.
I agree. So there's 2 things I want to say. You talked about you were the only Liberal in a group of progressive conservatives that received this honor, and I think, and certainly I know from working with you when I was in the legislature, you have proven that you work across the board. You try to include everybody. Everybody doesn't always come to the table to work together, but you have always reached out. And I think that medal, that you received that medal and were nominated by a progressive conservative, really speaks to your ability to do that. The other thing I want to talk about is young people. And as I said, I voted in every election except one. And I was devastated that I didn't get to vote in that election. But I heard a young person say to me, politics, like everybody's a liar. And I'm very defensive about that. And I said, tell me why you're saying that. And she said, well, look at the government we have here and this and this and this. And she kept showing me examples that I knew. And I said, but every government isn't like that. Every politician isn't like that. And I said, you can go back and look at when I was in the legislature. And I said, you can look at every single person. You can go and listen to what they had to say. Nobody lied. And I said, you have to hold, as you said, you have to hold the politicians to account. If they're saying something, then they better be able to prove it, and they better follow through on the commitments that they made. So I appreciate you saying that very much, and I so appreciate that you came today. So thank you to the audience for listening, and we are trying to get I've invited all 5 candidates now to come and do a podcast, and the same questions will be asked of everyone. And they can certainly put their own perspective on every question, which is why I tried to make them as open-ended as I could. But I want you to be an informed voter, and I want you to think before you mark an X on a ballot on April 28th or the early part of the election. But get out and vote. It's your responsibility. It's your right. And if you don't use it, you will lose it. So get out and vote. I want to thank Jessie for giving us the time and space to do this. And as I said, thank you to the audience for joining us here on Maria's Musings at Jess FM and Reiko. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully it'll be next Saturday morning.
Thank you.